A small wing of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives could keep important legislation from being adopted. A new report shows wealthier property owners in Iowa get a better deal on property taxes than everyone else. And Illinois gets the okay to stick to its plan for combining pensions for police and firefighters. We'll cover that ground this morning with former Scott County Democratic Party Chair Alicia Gateman and former Rock Island County Republican Party Chair Drew Milkey. Great to see you both. Let's get right to it. We're going to start in Illinois, where Democrats got help from the state Supreme Court. The justices recently upheld the plan to combine the pension programs for local police and firefighters. It consolidates almost 650 of these systems. This does not include Cook County or Chicago, by the way. Well, pensions have been a financial albatross in Illinois. They're notoriously underfunded. Supporters said a big reason to combine them is to lower the administrative costs, at least. Now, from 2021 to 2022, the funding gap actually fell from almost $13 billion to about $10.5 billion, so there is progress there. How significant is this decision? Are you confident it'll be enough to get Illinois' pension liability under control? Drew, you're the Illinois guy here.
Well, it's sure going to help, and it's obviously going to help taxpayers, so we're not funding as much as we could have, because this is economies of scale where you're putting them into two pensions. It's expected to earn about $820 million to $2.5 billion more in additional funds in the next 5 years. So, looking at it from a taxpayer standpoint, this is good news, in my opinion. Illinois Municipal League has been working on this for over 10 years. When I was on the village board, I remember even in 2007, this was a pension crisis then, and I'm glad to see that the can isn't getting kicked as far as it used to be. So I think this is going to be good news for local governments and to not raise taxes.
The pension crisis has been a problem for decades in Illinois. In fact, the courts have often intervened and knocked on away what lawmakers have wanted to try. Alicia, do you see this as a positive step, just like Drew does?
I absolutely do. I think, I'm glad for the court process, though, because I do think when you're talking with retirees and their pensions, that's such a very precious stage of life for folks, and to start tinkering with things and we've all lived through the stories of the Enrons and things where, you've got companies that lose their pensions for their retirees, and then they're left with nothing. Especially when you're talking police and fire, these individuals are sacrificing their lives for us every day, and so there's a real physical toll that comes from their jobs. And so the retirement isn't just about having some fun times at the end of life. A lot of times retirement comes because of physical inability to continue working, and so there's a physical demand that goes in these types of positions too. And so it's very understandable that folks are very concerned about where this goes going forward. But if the consolidation can be done, continue to be done transparently, and in a way that the retirees can feel comfortable and know that they're not going to lose out in the end, I think it's definitely a worthwhile, especially given the ability for it to also generate some more revenue for the funds.
This week, Iowa State Auditor Rob Sand went public with findings of a study into property taxes across his state. It draws a stark difference between wealthier neighborhoods and those that aren't as well-to-do. The surprise is that property owners in those wealthier areas have a lower tax burden than the rest. You would think it's the other way. Governor Kim Reynolds signed a $100 million property tax cut into law last year. The state auditor didn't issue any recommendations after submitting his report, only saying state lawmakers should take this into consideration when forming policy. I guess the question I'm going to ask, how should this discrepancy be addressed, if at all? Alicia Gateman.
I think it definitely needs to be addressed. It is something that, Iowa, so much of the burden is within property tax in Iowa, how our funding structure is set down for the state budget. And it is kind of oddly controlled, as it's very different than the Illinois system in place. But I think you have to have that parity. You've got a lot of locations. We've also had TIFs being used, some in some cases for residential, some for, commercial development across the state. There's been a very uneven use of that. But I absolutely think, you need to look at the overall cost per taxpayer, not looking at it, just at, what dollar amount are they paying? Because obviously the high income areas are going to pay quite a bit more, but proportionate to the income, I think, is key to be able to say, hey, you know, this is a fair and equitable system. We have so many blue collar and low collar, you know, neighborhoods and low income areas within the state, and especially within our rural areas, that there's a huge issue with that kind of parity coming down. And when they're asked to shoulder more of the burden than the higher new development areas are, and live in less, you know, desirable areas, I think that's a huge problem, and that's a huge equity problem. So I'm really glad to see, you know, this conversation happening, because I think, you know, the auditor brings forward really important points in this, and I think it's a lot of the low income and middle income families already know, and they experience day to day, but it needs to be talked about, you know, across the board, because this is a huge problem, and it's only getting bigger.
Drew Milke, how should this be addressed, if at all?
I think the legislators need to look at this. This is a study that's giving them good information. I think I agree with Ms. Gaiman when it's, you know, it's not proportional. Maybe the wealthy are paying more, but not at the same proportion. And I think we need to look at the vulnerable in our community always, to make sure everything is equitable. This is well timed, I believe, because in Governor Reynolds' State of the State address, that she's also cutting or going to a flat rate at 3.5 on the state income tax, with the proposal to remove state income tax by 2027. So this is a good time for the legislators to look at tax reforms. I'm all for the tax cuts, and I like what's going on in Iowa, but this is good information for the legislators to consider, probably things that are maybe a surprise. So I think it's good that this audit was done.
Drew Milke, Alicia Gaiman, stand by. Now our question of the week. What do you think should be done about wealthier homeowners having a lower property tax burden than those who's not as well-to-do in Iowa? Send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com, or respond to this post on Facebook at the Local 4 News WHBF TV page, or on my page.